So I think that we can eat these perfect ratios of fat and protein, have a great fasting routine, and still really struggle to heal. And a body that is healed will let go of weight. So let's talk about another reason why your body is not healing in this episode. Welcome back. My name is Sarah. I am known as Carnivore Yogi. Thank you so much for being here and clicking on today's video. This is a conversation I had with Irene Lyon. I actually had this conversation back in January, and I'm just now getting to posting the whole thing here on YouTube. I think it took me a few months because when I put something out on podcast, it's a little bit less vulnerable. On YouTube, people make comments and it's kind of scary. And so there's a lot that I dove into and talked about in this episode that goes pretty deep. It gets personal. So I hope that it helps you though. That's why I did that. And that's why I decided to go ahead and just put this full episode out, is because I really wanted to help people who are struggling again to heal their bodies, and they may not be paying attention to stress and trauma, how those things could be stopping you from ultimately healing. And a body that is healed will let go of weight. So if you have weight loss resistance, if you have an autoimmune issue that's just not going away, I think this episode could be extremely, extremely helpful for you. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm about halfway through Irene's 12-week program as of the day I'm recording this here at the end of April 2021. I'm absolutely loving it, and I love Irene. I'm gonna be on her YouTube channel soon, and so I hope you guys really do enjoy this episode. I did allow BetterHelp to sponsor this episode. This is a service that I have utilized since the pandemic. And you can be connected with a licensed therapist within 24 hours of making contact with them. So if you were to contact them right now, within 24 hours, you're gonna be in session with a licensed therapist. I think mental health has been one of those things that 2020, 2021 has brought to the forefront. And if you use BetterHelp, you can use my link, which will be below this video in the description, and get 10% off your first month. And again, be connected to someone within 24 hours. If you are struggling, you don't have to do this alone. I have had private clients of mine that have also used BetterHelp. If you don't like the therapist they give you right away, you can get a different one. And they have therapists that specialize in different areas like trauma, eating disorders. So I do highly recommend looking into BetterHelp, using my link below this description, if that is something that you want to work on. And I hope you enjoy this episode with Irene. Make sure to check her out. I will link her YouTube channel. It is highly addictive, so I'm gonna warn you guys before you head on over there. It's very addictive, and I hope you enjoy it. I'll talk with you guys again soon. All right, guys, thank you so much for coming back. I'm really excited about today's guest. I'm, full disclosure, doing some of her programs right now because her work has been, in just the amount of time that I've been connected to her work, very impactful in my own personal life. And I feel like it's really going to help you guys as well. A lot of you guys that are struggling with multiple autoimmune issues, and we're just focusing on diet, and routine. And, you know, I want to help you guys kind of look at some other things. So I want to introduce you to Irene Lyon. If you would introduce yourself a little bit to my audience.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. I'll do the Coles Notes version, I guess Cliff Notes, maybe in the States. I'm in Canada. I call myself a nervous system expert, neuroplasticity expert. And that is a title that isn't, you know, recognized by a medical establishment, but it's just kind of where I got to with my 20 plus years of training. So I started my first entry into working with the human body in university. I studied exercise science, was big into fitness, rehabilitation, sport nutrition, applied nutrition. So I actually did the nutrition thing and, you know, worked in gyms for like almost 10, 12 years and had some injuries of my own. I skied heavily in my 20s. And I injured my knee a few times. I won't get into the details, but they were pretty bad injuries. And it left me kind of crooked and a little out of balance. And all of the normal stuff that I had learned to teach others how to do rehab for their own bodies wasn't working on me. if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a big confusion because I'm like, I'm missing something. So that led me into the world of what we would call mind-body work, neuroplasticity work, retraining the brain, retraining the movements of the body. So I got into that through the work of the Feldenkrais method, which is the work of Moshe Feldenkrais. Totally changed my life. Again, I'll spare you all the details. And then was in private practice doing this work with people with back pain and chronic issues and more physical stuff, not so much mental, emotional. And I realized I was doing a lot of good work with people, but then there was a subset of people who weren't getting better with this. Mm. And I kind of was like, okay, what am I missing now? Because at that point, I'd already done 7 years of undergrad, university, 2 years in master's work doing research, 4 years studying Feldenkrais. And then I'm like, I'm still missing something. And so I started talking to people, and it turned out that what I was missing was the deep autonomic nervous system piece. Mm. So how stress, chronic stress, not like stress that's acute, but like long-term chronic stress and abuse, traumatic events, how they embed in our system if we don't work with them actively as human beings. And so when I look back to the summer, when I'm like, okay, I'm not doing something right with these clients, they all had something really wrong had occurred to them, whether it was severe childhood abuse, whether it was a severe accident. I'll never forget, one woman was in a propane explosion, so she was recovering from 3rd-degree burns. I mean, they were healed, but she was still in that hypersensitivity. One person had fallen off of a cliff under their back. They didn't break anything. Nothing was broken, but the shock was still in their system. And so no matter how much stretching, PT, massage, even the movement he was doing with me that was gentle and soft, and even that wasn't getting into his system, if I think about this one person. And so that's where I found the work of Peter Levine, who founded somatic experiencing, which is kind of one of the first forms of working with the body and trauma. So I immersed into that work. That was in 2008, which seems like ages ago. I guess it is a few years ago. And got into that, fell in love with it, and then realized, oh my God, I have stuff that I didn't even realize I had stored in. I mean, we just don't understand until it's presented to us. Mm-hmm. And so that led me down my own path of figuring out, not because I had buried some deep memory of being abused as a kid. It wasn't that. It was societal trauma. It was cultural trauma. It was surgical trauma. Chemical trauma was something I also had. So it was all these things that no one talks about in psychiatric medicine, right? And so I got into his work, went down a few more paths with some of his key trainers, learned about early trauma, in utero trauma, intergenerational trauma. I'm studying and dabbling with past life trauma right now through our mutual friend, right, Janet. And so it's just all like popping right now. And so what I do, I was in private practice for quite a while. About 5 years ago, I was like, something's got to change, because working with people one-on-one, while I did enjoy it, it was very rewarding, it wasn't enough for the person. Mm. They needed more than an hour with me a week if they were able to financially afford that, right? Most people can't shell out $200+ for an hour session once a week. It's just not the way our system works. So to wrap it full circle, I started developing homework for my students or for my clients, audio lessons and PowerPoint presentations. And I would like take paper and write graphs and send them home with these things. And one thing led to another. And I, from those materials, created the online work that you now have been experiencing. So that is what I do. Obviously, I do a lot of these chats. And I'm just really here to talk about this and get the word out, because it's kind of, in my opinion, one of, not the only, but one of the big missing links for human health and healing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, I remember listening to you on another podcast you did, I think it was a few years ago,
Sure.
talking about your experience as working in the fitness and nutrition
Yeah.
industry, and how, every January, which we're recording this here in January, everyone comes in and
Yeah.
want the diet and the workout program. And, I see the same thing. I've been teaching yoga for over a decade, and now I have this space of, my kind of platform that I work off
Yeah.
of. And so I have the same thing with people that, January is really busy because everyone wants a big change. And
Yeah.
then,
It drove me nuts.
yeah, it's hard.
It's hard. And, I know from watching, and I started working in a gym in 1997. I was still in university. Might have been even 96. And then my last day working at the gym was in like 2012. So I was in that industry for a while. I wasn't full time at the end. I was just covering and subbing. I love teaching group fitness, like circuit training, like high intensity stuff. But I'd have a client, personal training, which I actually, sorry, clients, I did not like. I didn't like standing there counting people's reps. And it's like, we should be able to do this ourselves. Like, this isn't right that I'm motivating someone to be fit. And I know there's a huge industry with that, but I'm like, something's not right. In the wild, the animals don't need motivation to go out and forage and find their food. It's just instinct, right? But I remember you'd write these programs, little cardboard pieces, and you put them in the drawers at the gym, 1 rep, 3 reps, sets, blah, blah, blah. And in January, everybody would be gung ho. And I would say, and I'm being very generous here, by April, I would go to those files. I would check on the people I had served and taught. No one had been to the gym.
Yeah.
They might have come like for a few weeks. And then what would happen is they would see me at the grocery store or
yeah, I know that. I know that interaction all too well.
I lived in a small town. I lived in, well, not small now, but Whistler. It's a resort ski town here. And I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing someone, especially when you worked at that gym for more than 10 years. So, be at a nice restaurant and be like, oh, I'm going to be good tomorrow. I'm like, I don't care.
Right.
I'm having my martini and tiramisu too. Like, it's not about that, but it just showed me, fitness is important. 100%, right? I studied exercise science. We need to exercise a lot and intensely. We need to eat good food. But there's this other piece that's filled with a lot of shame and guilt and just self-sabotaging. And from what I've seen, it really does stem from our early years and how we were raised to be with our bodies and honor our bodies and move our bodies, and a lot of the things I saw were the jocks and the athletes in high school were often the ones that when I would see them at my high school reunion who were the most unwell because their fitness was dictated by a game, by points, by praise, as opposed to, I was blessed. I had parents that took me hiking, canoeing, and skiing, and solo things in nature that weren't about how many goals did you get today, right? Anyway, so that's kind of my tangent there, but that was my that was like a big part of my life. And now it's obviously very online, but really watching how when people do get healed within their nervous system, they start to crave activity.
Yeah.
They start to feel what their body wants. And I'll tell you, I've seen many, many vegetarians start to crave meat. So to go with what you, I've sat next to friends who have been vegetarians their whole 20s and they crave, all they want is fried chicken, and I'll watch them eat like a plate of fried chicken legs and be like, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah.
So anyway, so
they learn to listen to their biology more once the nervous system is in a more integrated place. And I feel like, that's really the missing piece of what I'm seeing with so many people. And there's so much of your work that I'm like, have all this stuff written down. It's like, oh my gosh, where do we even
start?
begin with this stuff because there's so much, we talk about trauma and the ACE study and how that influences things, and then people being kind of in shutdown.
Yep.
And using diets, and I see people using fasting a lot in my community, and they're doing so much, they're addicted to fasting because they're addicted to going further into shutdown. And it's like,
yeah.
Oh yeah. There's
like ice bathing. It's the same thing.
Yes. I saw your Wim Hof video, because I was addicted to ice, of course, because this is my pattern here. I get addicted to things that kind of put me in that mode, because it's more comfortable for me, and until we kind of face, like, we have some things we need to deal with, we're going to continue to seek out like fasting or ice bathing or these kind of more restrictive ways of living. It's fascinating.
And the interesting thing was, like, I haven't really gotten into the fasting literature. I do know there's some pretty hard level science that, when you eat a lower caloric diet, there is longevity. It's that's not in the way that I'm seeing it done now. That's just having a more restrained, restricted caloric intake. And then the ice bathing thing is interesting, because there's nothing wrong with doing a cold plunge after a hot tub or a steam or a shower, but it's the length of time and the way in which it's done, almost for lots of people every day, as a way to feel alive and alert. And if you need to kickstart yourself with something that is putting your system into survival mode, something's not right.
Yeah.
So it's nothing that, if I was in a sauna in Finland by a beautiful glacier lake, I would definitely be diving into that lake for a quick refresher, but I'm not going to stay in there past my body saying, get out.
Right.
And that's the part that I think is getting a bit confused in that community.
Yeah. There's so much in kind of the health and fitness community right now that has me like, a little bit is good. We talk about hormesis and, having these hormetic stresses and how that can help the body repair and put us, accelerate things. But what I'm seeing happen a lot is that people are kind of like me, that are, wanting to fix, wanting to solve. There's stuff that needs to be done that necessarily doesn't have anything to do with a cold shower or fasting or cell repair. It's at a deeper nervous system level that needs to be looked at. However, these things really, with the fasting, I did a 7-day water fast over a year ago. And my body, it took me about a year to recover from that. And I've been very vocal about it. I've taken a lot of crap, being in a public platform. Fasting's very popular. People are very addicted to it, but
it depends on your system too. It's interesting. I remember traveling in Europe the first time. I was in my early 20s. I was like 21. I don't remember where I was, but I met an older woman. She was probably my age. I'm 45 now. She was probably in her mid 40s now that I think of it. And we were at a hostel in Italy in Cinque Terre, which is like the Mediterranean. And she was talking to me and my girlfriend about her weight. And she said, I don't know if she said this, but I think it was like, ladies, don't fast. I did that quite a while ago, and it was like years, like 5 years, 10 years. She went on a serious fast, and her body's metabolism got so messed up that it reset to the point where she then gained so much weight afterwards. The system was like, you're in starvation mode. We're not going to burn any, we're not going to put your metabolism back up. So it slowed down to what we would call freeze, like a shutdown state. Right. So her system went into, I'm about to die, so I have to preserve as much as I can. And she never found a way to kickstart that back up. I just remembered that right now. But
no one really talks about this thing, and what you said about the state of your system, this is what I'm seeing a lot of people that are in my groups, we we talk and it's like, okay, here's the things you can do. And then as the group progresses through the month, people start opening up. Well, I have these things, and people have traumas and things that are popping up for them, because when they're kind of changing the way they eat, they've taken out all the processed foods and the sugar. A lot of those emotions and things start coming up to the surface and bubbling up, and people want to share about it. And, you know, that's why I say, if you have a stressful life, if you have a lot of stress happening, I would not recommend fasting. I would not recommend skipping meals or doing these things, because more than likely your metabolism, your body is already kind of in safe mode,
survival mode.
Yeah, because of these stresses. And your work was really the first that I came across, where you just laid it out there. I mean, of course, I'm going to put your channel and everything in the show notes so everyone can check it out, because I've probably watched, I've watched so much of your work, because it's like, you're one of the first people I've really heard to say these things. And it's like so many light bulbs going off of like, this is why certain people are doing these diets and they're doing all these protocols, and they still have 4 autoimmune issues, and, you know, and they still, they can't lose the weight, and they're paying. You know, what's really sad on my end, and one of the reasons I really wanted to talk with you, is I have people that message me constantly on Instagram, and they've paid all the different experts, you know, $500 an hour. And they're being told, do this or do this or do this. And it's all like gonna kind of put you in the same shutdown place. You know, it's frustrating to watch, and my heart breaks for those people, you know, it really does.
No, it's a model that I hope will slowly start to fizzle out. And so, yeah, I think the more I work with my students and see the potential and the capacity for the system to heal on its own when it's given the right stuff, we just haven't been taught to think and feel for ourselves. And it's no different with our health and our healing, you know. And of course, if I often use the example, if I break a bone, or if I have like a serious infection, I'm going to go to the hospital and get the bone fixed and or get antibiotics. I'm not going to pretend to heal that with my special powers. But a lot of the things that have kept us unwell, like the autoimmune conditions, which we can talk about, and and the anxieties and psychiatric illnesses and addictions, they're based in stored survival stress. They're based in, from what we've seen with the literature, being in a sense of everything is dangerous around me growing up, and the system protecting, not because it thinks I better protect, because it automatically has to protect.
Yeah. And you do such a great job of talking about how the autonomic nervous system, you know, we think too much of end organs. And I've fallen into that trap with meditation of like, well, I'm thickening my cortex. You know, I know you've heard that, you know, it's like, I'm doing this work and it's thickening my cortex. And it's like, you have a thick cortex. Great. If your nervous system's dysfunctional, your gut's a mess, because we don't think about the fact that, you know, the ANS runs all of these organs. And if it's dysregulated, your gut's going to continue to be a mess, and your thyroid. And your brain, you have a very thick cortex, but still be a basket case, you know?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So how does, you know, for people listening, trauma really play into this nervous system dysregulation? I know that's a really loaded question.
Sure. Well, you know, it's interesting because trauma is this weird word that we're using a lot now. And, you know, there's the trauma that you would see in an ER. You know, if you think of shows like Grey's Anatomy and ER, it's like the trauma surgeon or the trauma wing, and that's where all the big accidents come in. So that's one kind of trauma. But then in the world that I have been trained in and grew up in with Peter Levine and some of my other mentors like Kathy Kane and Stephen Porges and Bessel van der Kolk, Gabor Mate, trauma isn't an event necessarily. It's in the somatic, the body, and it's in the nervous system. It's in the tissues. It's in our behaviors. It's in how we relate to the world. So someone who has the more classic definition of trauma would be someone that has PTSD. So it's kind of this like, PTSD means something bad, traumatic happened. Post-traumatic stress disorder is what that is. And if we think of the classic PTSD case, it's often talked about as it's a war veteran, a person, it was Vietnam when that all got brought up in those definitions. But it's like the person sitting there having their cup of tea, and then all of a sudden a car backfires. That's the classic example. And they startle as if it's gunshot wounds or gunshot sound, sorry. And so in their system embedded, it isn't just in the brain, the reaction is so quick. That's a full body response, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you feel into something, you have the shivers all over your body. I'm sure most people have felt goosebumps come all over their system. That's an autonomic nervous system response. When I drink my tea here, I don't have to think liquid go into esophagus, go into the duodenum, go into blah, blah, blah. It's just happening. And so the autonomic nervous system is responsible for our startle and protection, but it's also responsible for digestion, immune system, reproductive function, hormones, cardiovascular, blood pressure, all of that, right? So there's often this confusion that the nervous system is all about bad stuff. And it's not. We need it so that we protect, as if, again, I think something's coming at me, I'm going to protect, I'm going to automatically go into protection mode. But it's also what governs our repair,
right? Our
rest, our digest, my ability. Like if I start making faces to you, you're going to see our engagement is also through the autonomic nervous system, through part of it called the parasympathetic, specifically the vagus nerve, which is the parasympathetic, and the social engagement system. So it's a very broad, vast topic, the autonomic nervous system and trauma. Now, to go back to the thing of what is trauma, how does it impact? A lot of times we think trauma is just war. It is horrific abuse, accidents. And what we are seeing and what the research has shown is that it doesn't have to be physical attacks. It doesn't have to be sexual abuse. It doesn't have to be severe verbal abuse. That is all that as well. But it can also be not allowing kids to go to the bathroom when they have to.
Right.
Mommy, I'm hungry. I need something to eat. No, you're not, dear. Wait for dinner. It's in an hour. So someone be like, well, come on, Irene. Like, that's ridiculous. That's just the parent teaching the child restraint and being able to, it's like, well, depending on how old they are, they're hearing their bodies.
Right.
They're feeling hunger. And then the person who's teaching me how to be with my body is saying, no, I'm not hungry. That then instantly puts a confusion into that little person's biology. They might really be hungry, right?
Right.
And then they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not getting what I want. I mean, they might have a tantrum and break down, or they might go into a shutdown state.
Yes.
To not feel the hunger in their bellies. So you see, there's all these ways in which we trap not just traumatic events and stressors and big fight flight energies, like as if we saw someone in the war zone area, or we're being attacked, or we're in a car accident. Those are true too. But more often than not, I'm finding, and my colleagues would probably back me up on this, it's the little things that we forget. It's the surgery, it's the dentist that wasn't nice. It's the school teacher that'll put us in the cloakroom because we're being bad. And, just all these little things that add up. And it's also the inability, or not the inability, but the lack of expression, emotional expression, that has really become insidious and has been insidious in how we raise children, especially in the Western world. Don't cry, don't get angry, or you can get angry, but you can't cry, or girls cry, boys get angry. I'm just making those very general distinctions, right? I fall when I'm little, I scrape my knee and I start to cry and I'm told immediately, don't cry, it's not that bad. Well, it is that bad.
Right.
And so this is how how slowly, insidiously, early on, our human needs and expressions get slowly squashed.
Right.
He would say that those are traumatic survival stresses that are being stored.
And we don't give our bodies the opportunity to kind of cycle through. I remember listening to you talk about a little child, falling on a bike and needing to scream and just have a moment, and the parent coming over and saying, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. And trying to not letting them cry and just let their nervous system kind of go through the up and then the back down again. And when we do that over time, so many times we just, we trap all that survival stress in our bodies.
We do. We do. And then we don't realize why, when we do get into a kerfuffle or an accident or something stressful as an adult, why something seemingly so benign creates such a big drama. And it's not necessarily because of that thing, but it's the stored memory, the stored body, we would call it procedural, but also emotional memory that's waiting to explode. And then you have something very similar occur as an adult, and it makes no sense. And then people think they're insane because they're breaking down at the bank because they can't get something out of their account. It has nothing to do with that. It's just that there's been this dam, if you will, like if you think of like a river, it's been dammed for so long. And then all of a sudden the dam just breaks open. And people get flooded. Right?
And I think 2020 was just this big, it's like a global trauma for everyone. And, you're online, so you probably experienced a bit of this, or your people, maybe, hopefully you have running your accounts for you. It's like people were just wide open in 2020, just what they would say online behind a keyboard. And, I did my best to, stay calm and disconnect when I could, but it was hard to just kind of see so many people coming completely unraveled last year. And it's still continuing on into this year.
The thing that's interesting about last year is that everybody thinks that the expressions and the bad stuff that was going on and the lack of kindness was because of last year.
Exactly.
Last year was no. What occurred from what I saw, because I have friends and colleagues and students who were like, we're fine. I mean, it sucks that this, whatever, won't go into it, but the stress was already there.
Yes.
The trauma was already there. The lack and ability to discern and feel was already there. In my sense, last year just heightened everything.
Yeah.
It put everybody into a Vipassana meditation.
Oh God. That's the one I will refuse to do.
It forced everyone to be in a situation. And of course, there's situations that weren't good, people that are trapped in abusive homes. And that's just horrifying to think of, all the kids that couldn't go to school, but then there's the people that were okay in their home and safe. But what do you do when you don't have your outlets? When you can't go shopping, when you can't go to the gym, when you can't travel and get away on that trip, which is how nothing wrong with going away and shopping, but it was interesting when things opened up here. And we never really had a full lockdown here in Vancouver, but when it got a little more open, I couldn't believe the amount of people lining up at the Lululemon store. I was really? You can go shopping and that's where you want to go? But it was so interesting because it was that, and sure, maybe they needed clothes, probably not.
Right.
But, it showed how as humans, we've been so cultured and conditioned to not know how to be with the discomfort. And it, as simple as it sounds, it goes back to little Johnny or Susie falling off their bike and not being allowed to feel. And have that honoring of the feeling and the pain, and having an adult that's emotionally mature, let them go through that cycle and not freak out or not shut them down. It takes maturity, and it takes your own healing in your own system to allow a little person to go through that experience, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think parenting has been, for me, it was like ripping off a giant Band-Aid. It brings up everything. You know, my sister has a new baby, and her husband are just, you know, at each other's throats, and they've been home because of the pandemic. And I remember my daughter's 13 now. And I just remember when she was really little, how much we fought about everything, because it was like, you know, you have this little person crying that needs you, and you have to, and it just brings up all of your traumas, you know, it really does.
Well, it shows us how unwell we were handled when we were young.
Yes.
Because if you take, and I always like to give this sort of drastic 180-degree awareness, like if you were to go into the wild with some animals who are raising babies, there's no confusion about what to do.
Right.
You know, usually the father is gone, and that's
Right.
not because they're being malicious and mean. It's just that's how, like, the mother is taking care, and she knows how to feed them, and she lets them feed when they're hungry. She doesn't swat them away when they try to go to her nipple. You know, it's like babies or kittens, cats hungry or whatever, we feed. And so humans are so interesting because the human baby really needs the same kind of love that a mama bear would give. Right?
Yeah.
Safety, food, protection, safety, and then eventually teaching it how to be in the environment. It's really that simple. Of course, we've got language and writing and all of that, but it comes because it's built in us to have that occur. But we get really overly complicated in those first few years of life. And then if we were mistreated, or if we had weird attachment situations with how our parents were, we may either do the same thing, or we may swing in a totally different direction to not repeat.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been done out of a biological following of the impulse. It's typically more cognitive, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
You know, and now that you kind of bring that up, this is another thing, you know, our bodies, people try so hard to do the program, do the diet, do the protocol, do the meditation, do the self-care, do all this stuff. And there's our body, part of our body, the deep healing that needs to be done doesn't understand language, so to speak. And that's another place I really see people struggling, is like they're going to, you know, I think there's a time and a place for therapy, and that it does have benefits 100%, but to kind of do some of this deeper healing to help re-regulate a nervous system that has been dysregulated with trauma and all these things, you know, there's a deeper level that we have to really look at.
Oh, for sure. And what you said about cognitive, verbal. So in the first few years of life, we're not verbal. Like we're hearing sounds, we're hearing language. Granted, we have the fortune of having a person there talking to us, right? So we're putting that through our system, but it's somatic. We're feeling. And so if there was trouble when we were young, that's where that ACE study comes in, Adverse Childhood Experiences study. Whether it was because mom and dad were abusive, maybe mom and dad hated each other. They loved their kid, but they hated each other. That's more common than not. Yeah. Or they're not being free in their expression. So they're repressing. Baby feels that. Birth trauma, if there was a really difficult birth, that can set a person up for a lifetime of troubles. Surgeries, when we were really young, infants, a lot of infants have surgeries to save their lives, and it's very stressful. And it used to be that people like, oh, well, they weren't old enough to remember, so it's not going to impact them. We know that that's not true now. It's just like people now know that if someone is unconscious on the operating table, they can hear what the surgeons are saying, right? Like Just because we're asleep, just because we can't communicate, doesn't mean we're not taking in everything.
Yes.
And so we know that that early time is so precious and so important. And so if it is meddled with or mucked with, or something is not safe, regulated, the little one isn't learning how to co-regulate with the caregiver because the caregiver isn't regulated in their own system, they will, and I'm being very general here, but they will be born into, they will learn how to be in a dysregulated nervous system state.
Yeah.
Where they're either too high in fight flight, or they're too high in freeze, or there's usually a combination of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the ACE study, you know, I learned about this years ago when I did a trauma-informed training.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know that a lot of people really are familiar with that and like the strong scientific ties to trauma and chronic illness as someone gets older on that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it was originally an accident,
Yeah.
air quotes. So it was in Southern California, La Jolla, and it was how shall I don't want to give the full story because it'd take a while, but basically there was a healthcare program through an insurance company in California, or maybe it's the States, Kaiser Permanente.
Yes.
And the program was for people who were incredibly overweight, so over fat. Technically, we would say obese. And they were having huge success with the dietary intervention, exercise, therapy, group support, really the real pieces that we need, that we know we need, in addition to now we know we need the trauma stuff too,
yes.
the nervous system stuff. But so people were having a lot of success. And then what the main researcher, Vincent Felitti, found was that there were people that were just disappearing, like people who were doing really well, dropping hundreds and hundreds of pounds. And he's like, what's going on? Like, you would think that they would want to continue this work. So long story short, he was able to follow up with these people. And when I say these people, I don't mean just like 10 or 20. At the end, it was something like 18,000 people.
Oh, wow.
So it was big.
Yeah.
And turns out that the people who dropped out and who no longer continued had some kind of early adversity, some kind of trauma growing up. And so over time, they questioned and did surveys and came up with, in the end, a questionnaire of 10 questions that asks things like, was a parent incarcerated? Was there alcoholism? Were parents divorced? Was one of your parents not mentally well to take care of you? Was there physical hitting? Was there verbal? Was there sexual misconduct? All these things. And so what they found is that if you had more than one, like each score, each point, and I don't like to quote stats because I always forget them anyway, but it was along the lines of the more points or scores you had, the more likely you were to get sick later in life. And the list is long. Chronic illnesses like fibromyalgia, autoimmune illnesses, chronic pain, addiction, heart disease, cancer, arthritis, like osteoarthritis. It was just this long list that most of society assumes, well, that's just a genetic thing.
Yes.
You're born with it and you get it. And there's some half truth to that, and that we have genetic predispositions in us from what we know now. This could completely change in another 10 years and we learn more, but we have these predispositions. They get turned on based on how the autonomic nervous system is functioning. So if the system is in huge dysregulation and swinging between fight and flee and freeze, and in this looping of nervous system chaos, if we use that term, it will turn on, it will express the genetics that will create those illnesses. And you know, the research was so conclusive, and they did this in multiple countries, So they did meta-analyses, and they thought, oh, well, maybe this is just a socioeconomic thing. Maybe it's an American thing. And no, when they looked at other Westernized nations, it was the same thing. And so when you see enough of that, it's almost fact. Like when there is stress early in life that is chronic and constant, the autonomic nervous system is put into a state of severe stress. Typically, the person shuts down because when you're in that soup of constant unsafety, you can't handle it anymore. You can't fight, you can't flee, so you freeze. Freeze is like a metabolic shutdown within the system. But under that metabolic shutdown is the stored fight flight. There is that stored intensity. And so when we start to look and work with folks who know that that was their early upbringing, and we're starting to peel back the layers and get back into the body, a person will go from feeling pretty numb to feeling anxious.
Yes.
They'll be like, something must be wrong because I'm feeling all this anxiety, or I'm always angry now, or, you know, whatever. And I'm like, that's good because that's the fight flight energy coming up. But we also have to make sure that it comes up and out and it's released in a way that is titrated and contained, because if it's too much, you can flare the condition even more. Or the mental, you know, thing. I don't even like to say illness, because to me, it's not an illness. It's just the state of the system confused about what's going on.
Right.
I hope that all makes sense.
Absolutely. You know, to me, and, you know, what people want is this fast, cathartic release.
It'd be so easy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but that's in my experience, it's just not it, you know, and we talked a little bit before we started about, you know, my history with meditation and, you know, the 7-day fast that I did. What I had done directly before the 7-day fast was spent 10 days in Bali meditating 8 hours a day.
Whoa.
And I came home from that meditation back to my life. You know, my daughter's 13, she's nonverbal autistic also. So it's a stressful home situation. And, you know, so I came from across the other side of the world, and then I had to come back to life. And then I said, well, I'm going to do a 7-day water fast. And I look back on that whole thing now, and I'm just kind of learning what I'm learning through your work. I'm like, oh, wow, that is really interesting, you know?
Well, I mean, everyone's a bit different, and I don't know your early history, but it's all of us have some form of something. Right. And so just being in the public school system will do that to you. You know, if you're not smart by the way that they want you to be, you're in trouble. Right. But I did a video a little while ago on my channel about why we continually self-sabotage and flee from health and have resistance and procrastination. And it's a huge one in our society. And if we were brought up in a state of fight, flight, freeze, and I'm being very cautious here because there will be someone saying, I wasn't beaten, we had plenty of food. I'm like, yes.
Well, Dr. Gabor Mate, when you read his book, it's like his trauma was, you know,
Holocaust.
Pre-verbal Holocaust. I mean, he
had a mother that loved him, but she had to, you know, I mean, and so where was I going? All right. So if we had some form of needing to shut down, needing to stay in survival stress, we will know that wiring really well. And we won't realize how, and I say this with air quotes, how safe it feels to be in survival. And so if we think back to like the New Year's resolutions thing, there is like an element of survival in that. There's there's a preparation. Oh, what am I going to do in January? There's this planning of it, and then it happens and it's euphoric, and you've got all these new cool routines and this new book and your new pens and your new diary and whatever. And then it's like a novelty. Novelty wears off. It's like when you fall in love, you never can get that feeling back, that first kiss. It's just, I wish, you know, I say to my husband, God, I wish I could feel that energy when he's like, I'm like, I know it's never going to happen again in that way. Right. But I mean, there's a great example. There's a reason why people get into relationships over and over again.
Yeah, the same toxic relationship with a different person.
Yeah, there's that high, that feeling, and it feels good, right?
Yeah.
That euphoric. But then the real work comes when you are in the mundane. And I think the healing of our human condition, having been in the fitness industry, the nutrition industry, the mind-body industry, and now this industry, I don't even like calling it that, but that's what it is. I believe we need to get out of this way of looking for these set plans that are from the outside. It doesn't mean you can't learn from someone on the outside. I mean, that's what I do. But the one thing I won't give my students is, if you're feeling this, do that.
Do this, yeah.
If you're feeling this, do that. And I have a lot of folks in the trainings that I do will say, well, I read somewhere that when you have pain here, it means this.
Right.
And I've seen how brainwashed we've become with this information, and people are not learning how to go in and really trust what's in their system.
Yeah.
And I hate to bring it back again, but it comes, you know, that vignette of little Susie falling off of her bike. If she wasn't allowed to feel and trust her pain, that's where it all starts. That's where that mistrust starts. And so to repair that takes time.
Yes.
Right. Those wires are in our nerves. They're in the ways that the pathways have been created and how the hormones get secreted and all the things. And so while I know that there can be moments where someone does have an aha, an awakening of something, the question is, what happens after that?
Right.
Can they continue to follow through with the rewiring, the rebuilding, and have it be very deep as opposed to surface level, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And not just, you know, you do the things, you do the routines, and then all of a sudden it's like all that stuff gets thrown by the wayside, and it's back to square one, you know?
And then it frustrates people because they think something's wrong with them.
Yes. That's what is so heartbreaking to me about kind of where I really am trying to help people right now, is that there are a lot of gurus and a lot of people who say, just do this and everything will get better. And it's overpromised, you know, and in my space, it's making me just kind of angry. And I've spoken out about it a lot, is there are so many people that buy my book, my program, follow my protocol, and this, and this will all disappear for you. You're going to feel better. And what happens when it doesn't work out for those people? Totally. You know, is they end up feeling like they are a complete failure because they followed the book. They did all the steps. They ate the food that was said in the prescribe. You know, I've got people in my group now, and they want to, you know, we test blood sugar, and I kind of teach them how to hack blood sugar and, you know, tracking sleep and all that. And I'm like, but at some point you have to put all those tracking devices away, 100%. Because you're creating more and more stress for yourself by, you know, looking at what the blood sugar meter reads at 3 a.m. when you're awake. And like, it's, you know, it's exhausting.
It's very exhausting. And you know, to honor one of my mentors, Kathy Kane, she said one day, or she said many times, because someone's always asking, so what does regulation look like? What does it look like to not be completely swimming in all your traumas? And of course, there's, you know, better gut health, better immune system, you know what you need, you can set boundaries. But she would say, you basically wake up in the morning and you just go about your day. You don't have a list of all the things that I got to meditate for 10 minutes, and then I got to do my breath exercises, and then I have to do the cold bath, and then I need to eat this exact food and take all these. And I'm all for, and I do meditation. I eat certain foods that I like, or I change them. But when you're restricted in a controlled, when you have to have a control over your day, that is not freedom.
Yeah.
Right. And some people might need to start with that. I will give it that much, you know. So I have courses that I put people through, or they sign up and we guide them through them. And there is a structure at the beginning, for sure.
Yeah. The 5 stages of neuroplastic healing. I was just reading your ebook on that. And down at the bottom, the very first one is like the food and the environment.
Yeah.
You kind of have to have that
we need to have clean air and clean food. And that is, I don't talk about it so much, but I hope that's just a given. Right. And then once we know those are there, and that's why some people, when they've been so unwell and have had such bad behaviors that are not good for them, and they do clean up their diets really simply, it doesn't have to be crazy. And they drink more water and they move a bit more, even if it's just a 20-minute walk a day, things just change so much. And it's like, well, that's because you're giving the system what it needs, but then we got to go a little deeper.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't want to stay at step one. And that's where I feel like so many people are at step one, and they're just, there's so much more than just the bottom part. Yeah.
Yeah. And that thing about the guru and the book, I mean, that's a really interesting one to me. As you were saying that, I've had lots of people want me to write a book. When are you going to write a book? And I had 4 publishers ask, and I'm just like, I want to, but I don't want to. Because I'm like, well, if you're waiting for me to write a book to heal your trauma, you're missing the point. Because everything that I've got right now is all you need for this stuff. It doesn't mean you might not see a psychotherapist or see a massage therapist or get some osteo done, or heck, go to a meditation retreat once you've got these foundations in place.
Right.
But I find that the book is a novelty. It's like, oh, I'll have this book, and now it all, if I just follow this and it's like, no, right? So
because it's just not that simple.
I'll write it at some point, but I'll be very clear that this is not, Bible. It's not the only thing.
Yeah.
And the one thing, if anything, I've learned, Sarah, from my students is the ones who really take a commitment to helping themselves and getting out of victimhood.
Yes.
A lot of people don't like me saying that, but it's true. It's like, that doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge that, yes, there was bad stuff that occurred.
Right.
But we can't stay trapped in that, because that past is it is now in your physiology if you haven't dealt with it. And that's why it can be so hard. It's like pulling away crazy glue, like pulling stuff away. It's like, yes, that past is still in your system if you haven't worked at that nervous system level. And so to break out of that mode takes some doggoness, like it takes some serious commitment, and knowing that there might be 5 steps forward, 3 steps back.
Yeah.
And often when the steps back happen, people will say, oh, well, this must not be for me, because it would just be smooth sailing.
Right.
And I'm here to say, you will have steps back. There will not be this full go, green light, go ahead, everything's going to be perfect. There's going to be setbacks. Things are going to feel uncomfortable, because if we think about it, what we stored when we were little was really uncomfortable stuff. It was uncomfortable pain, sensations, emotions. And so to work with that means that we're going to feel a little gross and yucky sometimes. And that doesn't mean that you're not doing it right. But the industry has taught us through all the imagery that when you're at these retreats, when you're doing work, you look beautiful and peaceful. They don't show the pictures of like snot coming out of your nose, red in the face, screaming with the double chin, It's just it's like, that's not how it works. Like childbirth, I've never given birth to my own biological children. I know many who have, and I've seen it in real life but it's like, it's not this beautiful breathing. It's painful, and it's intense. And we are so afraid to see that intensity in humans.
Yeah. That's the simple truth, is like, we're completely terrified of the rawness that comes with healing, and to the way that the things I'm really loving about your program is it's a safe container, I feel, to do that, even though it's virtual. I'm doing the 21 day right now, and I started it well over 3 weeks ago. And I'm only on day 12 right now. And I'm perfectly okay with that, because one of the things that's so beautiful about your program that is new for me, because I'm like, when I started yoga, it was like I needed to go 7 days a week and I had to do it all the time, and sometimes 2 classes a day. And then I needed to become a teacher. And it was, I'm a recovering addict. My audience knows this about me. I have 4 years sober from alcohol and substances, and I've come from a family of addicts. And so this behavior, this all or nothing, this complete shutdown is classic for me. Yeah. And it's sneaky. It's what's comfortable for me is to find different ways. And I'm so crafty to do this kind of shutdown thing, you know, but you know, just this, it's like have to do all of it now, the more the better. But the thing about your program that's totally different that I'm just enjoying is just in the whole titration, you know, it's like, just a little bit, you know, just a little bit, just do the neurosensory exercise and then let it be, just give it some time. And I've never allowed for that in my life before. And it's like, such a safe container to just like, okay, I don't have to do like the whole 21 days in 5 days, which is what I would love to do. Or even in the 21 days, you know, there's, and your nervous system may not need to go that fast. It may be too much. So
that's a great share, and thank you for sharing that, because it's sneaky, you know, and you've done so much work prior to this, so you knew those signs. You could observe that wiring from your early years, you know, of pushing. And so that's the other thing, is because we have a higher brain, we want to use it to observe these habits. And that is meditation, right? What you're doing by pausing and waiting is a very high level of self-awareness work. And so there's often this, okay, well, I have to sit here at this time totally with no distractions, or I won't do my practice. And I try to say to people, do your practice when you're sitting in your car, waiting at a light, when you're tying up your shoes, when you're doing the dishes.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be in this perfect Zen place where you've got all the kids locked away and it's just you. And
you're in a soundproof room. And
and I think there's a time and a place for that, for sure. Like if I was teaching in a workshop setting, I wouldn't want people's kids and dogs in the room. Like it would be like, this is our teaching. But if we can't learn to integrate it to the outside world, a person will never learn how to take it over for themselves. Right. And so I'm glad you shared that, because a lot of times our perfectionism, our training from school gets in the way. Like if I don't do this in 21 days, I fail. Right. And I'm sure there's quite a few people that have gone through the course or purchased the course and haven't started it yet. You know, or they've done 2 days and then they dropped off because they couldn't get to it the 3rd day, and they just figured out must not be for me, because if it was good, I wouldn't have trouble getting into it. It's like, no, feel the discomfort and the trouble getting into it, and then go into that sensation. What's in that's stopping you? And usually there's a whole world there, but we have to pause and wait and feel it and give ourselves the grace to just chill.
And that's, you know, really the message that I wanted to convey to people who watch me. And, you know, that's why I want to bring you on, is because I just see so many people, number one, they're in this shutdown mode and they're trying to do everything perfectly. And they've probably got their metabolism in a state where it doesn't matter how perfect their diet is, the weight's not going to come off. The healing's not going to happen. And so they're kind of in this stuck place, and they're like, how do I, now that I kind of know, like, that's where I'm at now, what, you know, like, what's the protocol for that? What's the book for that? What do I need to do with that? And, you know, it's what I always tell my people is like, I just want to give you guys resources. I want to help you, because this path may not work for you. And just continuing to find things that will lead them on the path to ultimately healing. Which I'm finding is not just a diet, you know, it's
no. And you know what you said, it triggered me to want to mention, you know, this idea of being in a more shut down state and having trouble losing weight. Shutdown isn't like this on or off switch.
Right.
Like if I was to have, knock on wood, this doesn't happen, but if I was to break my leg and my femoral artery is spurting out blood, I want to go into shock. I might even pass out, right? Just because it's so intense, the pain, and the blood has to go to my core so I don't lose blood to my organs and brain. That's like true shock shutdown, like. But obviously someone might be, like us, just being able to talk and function and feed the kids and go to work, and maybe they're even exercising every day. A person who is still functional can be frozen.
Right.
And that's where it gets a bit confusing, because it's like, well, I'm super functional. I'm clearly not in shock and catatonic on the couch. It's like, no, you're not. But the system is so clever at staying contained. So I would say things like, are you able to get angry, like fully angry? Are the tears able to come through? Or is there a stopping? Is there a, oh, I can push through this and not feel pain? There are these signs that lets us know that we're in the functional freeze state. Being clumsy, bumping into things, not having spatial awareness, getting into accidents all the time, getting into toxic situations without realizing it. And then before you know it, you're in a bind, right? And so getting out of that functional freeze is, in my opinion, essential, especially when we're looking at nutrition and we want to call it weight loss, because we need to be able to listen to the deep qualities of the body so that we know what it needs. And so it can be very comforting to just follow a program or protocol, because we're not having to feel what it is that we want. It's like on the piece of paper, right? And we're just following the list, and we're very good at following lists because that's maybe how we were raised, right? School-wise. But the moment it's like, okay, well, don't look at the book. What are you wanting? And at the beginning, it might be confusing. It's like, well, I'm not sure. I don't know what I want. And that's a starting point. But yeah, the functional freeze thing and being in that state, I can't over mention it, because it is one of the more insidious things that we have going for us in Western society. It's what allows the working mother that has 3 jobs to keep her house clean and keep her kids fed. The more I learn, the more I see how much we override our fatigue. And it ain't good, right? And this is what leads people to get sick. Yeah. The system can't keep going that long. And then literally, as Gabor Mate said and coined on his book, the body will say no. Yeah. And so I'm here to also say, be very aware of how much a person pushes through. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I don't really advocate for people to do a lot of fasting when they're trying to heal, because to do that, you have to constantly override your hunger, and you have to fight through the fatigue, and you just, it's like, we already do enough of that already. If you're already ill, if you already have metabolic issues, you're more than likely going to make that worse, because you're just overriding your system. And one thing that you've taught in your work that I really resonate with is that as children, we've been in difficult situations that we just really learn how to numb out the body, from the neck down to the pelvis, especially. We just turn that off. And as adults, we still do it. And like you were saying a little earlier, it's comfortable because
it's what
that's
we know.
how we survived. But there comes a point, and I feel like a lot of people that are in my community where they're like, okay, what I've been doing is just not working anymore. I'm exhausted. I can't do this. I can't chase this, any longer.
And I will say, to kind of go back to just the state of the time, the current time, the year, my sense is we can't get away with this. Like we haven't been able to get away with it, and this is maybe a bit more existential, but the universe isn't going to allow us to keep going this way.
Agree.
It's like we've reached a tipping point, not just collectively, but the individuals feed the collective. And so and I've seen, and of course, this isn't a double-blinded placebo-controlled study, but I'm seeing people who I know from my childhood or people a little older than me, just acquaintances who have not taken the time to really learn about themselves and their biology. They're not doing well.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing. Yeah.
They don't look good, Sarah. Like
yeah.
they've
yeah.
aged in the last year,
yeah.
which shows me, and again, this is just my own brain trying to figure out more universal stuff that's going on, is like the last year was stressful, but I feel really good.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel that I've aged too much in the last year, but I've seen people that they look like they're 10 years older than they were last year.
Yeah.
And that isn't going to get better on its own. There needs to be a very, in my opinion, again, a very strong desire to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
Deeply, not just, yes, food, diet, but like deep, old patterns.
Yeah.
Traumatic patterns. And if you only want to deal with the little things, that's fine. That's a way to titrate in.
Yeah.
Right. And the system won't ask you to process the big kahunas at the beginning because it knows it's not ready. But I will say the last year, holy cow, I have processed stuff that I've never knew was still in my system.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Jesus, this just keeps coming, and it's hard, but it also frees up space.
Yeah.
And it makes our immune system stronger.
Yeah.
Case in point, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's, man, there's just so much that I'm like, I don't want to
talk forever.
We really could. I guess the last thing that, I really did want to touch on is just this whole pathway of the trauma release, because, one thing as a yoga teacher and, like we talked about in the beginning, I was ready to do this meditation teacher training, which was very intense because I do enjoy meditation. I do like it. It does help me.
Nothing wrong with it. It's important.
But the thing is that your work really helped me to really understand, because as a yoga teacher, people would come take my class. And if I was teaching a very slow restorative class, I would see people get very agitated or just really like want to jump up out of the room and leave. And I would just be like, well, they just need to just get it together, like, and I didn't really realize what was happening, even though I was trained trauma informed and all these things. And people can't sit down to meditate because it's almost like asking them to staple their face to a wall. And so that was kind of one of the reasons I said, I need to do this work, learn what Irene's teaching first, and then maybe go do the training in a couple of years. But I want to help people. And I felt like right now the need of the time is not for me to do more training in meditation and yoga, because people literally can't take the deep breath and do the breath work and the meditation and the yoga.
Or they'll try and they'll force themselves into spiritual bypass is just another way of saying freeze, right? They'll because we again got to understand we have this higher brain that can withstand immense pressure. Think about people who are interrogated in war settings. Like there is strength in the human system to push through pain. But in this case, it's like we flipped it, like really. And of course, I think we've gone through the history of the mind, body, health, healing industry for a reason. It's been backwards, right? And so when someone falls into this deeper way of working with the nervous system, they have tried all the things, diet, exercise, meditation, shamans, you name it. And they're like, I don't know why I still have this, blah, blah, blah. And then they just do the basics of learning how to orient or learning about their stress physiology and some of the things that you're learning in the course. And they're like, how come this wasn't taught to me before? I'm like, that's because we didn't know about this before, but now we know. So why can't we just all agree that this is the first step?
Yes.
And then, because I do believe, and people who follow me might get confused, I do believe in meditation. I do believe in training our consciousness. It's a very, very powerful technology, the human consciousness. But if it's on top of a chaotic biology that is not well, that consciousness is going to be used. I mean, I'm going to bring Star Wars in here for bad stuff, right? Like the dark side is going to come in, and it also makes us susceptible to more trauma if we're just working on that and we're not working on the biology that literally feels when danger is coming our way.
Yeah.
And so I think that they're all there. And I think that it's kind of like, I wish that we could just all agree that babies need to be treated in a certain way.
Yes. Yeah.
But my hope is that by the time I die, that is there.
Yeah.
We'll see, because there is a way. There is a way that they need to be cared for. And there's all this, oh, well, I'm doing this kind of style, this and that kind of parenting. And it's like, no, they need safety, all these things, so that they can have a solid, robust nervous system. And then their creativity actually explodes.
Yeah.
Right. If you actually raise a little one such that they have those pieces, they will figure out where they need to go based on, their soul path, if you believe in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So no, I meditation is important, but I agree. If the system, I'm thinking about your class, people, they do the class because they've come for the class, Sarah.
Right.
You've done the movement, and now you're asking them to just chill and be in savasana. You're like, what? That's not doing anything.
Right.
But it's not because they don't want it. They don't know what to do with it.
Right.
Right. A classic thing I would see when I was in private practice would be, because I would do a lot of table work. I work with the kidneys, the brainstem, the tissues very subtly. And the moment someone would lay on the table, they would go into this like this, I'm supposed to be quiet and close my eyes and regulate my breath. And I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, can you just open your eyes for a second and look at me? And honest to God, most of the time, many of the time, that connection would be made, and that permission to not try to be calm, and tears would just start falling out.
Yeah.
Because like, you don't need to pretend to be calm. You're not. You're here because you're, messed up in your anxiety. I'm being very liberal with saying that, but they know they're there because something's not right. Yeah. And then they sit on the table or lay on the table, and I'm supposed to be calm. I'm like, no, we need to work on the dysregulation that isn't allowing you to sleep at night. Right. For example.
Yeah. That's the biggest, day one of my January group is like, everyone comes in with a sleep problem. No one can sleep. That's the biggest complaint. It's, I can't sleep and I can't lose weight. Number one, number two. Yeah. And then it's like, I have Lyme disease and chronic this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, that kind of should be more important than the weight loss, but how we're societally, we're programmed that way to think the weight is the most important thing. But the sleep thing, that's the biggest thing. I see people having those disturbances, and you can go out and look at light first thing and do all these routines. But if you don't help the nervous system,
you'll be alert. You can drink all the chamomile tea in the world and it's not going to calm you down.
Right.
And that's, I love chamomile tea, but if I have not expressed an emotion that day, which is rare these days, but if something's bugging me and I haven't noticed it, I'll know it when I go to bed because my legs will be buzzy or I'll just be awake or whatever. And the key is to let that, and this is what you learn in the work, you want to be with that buzz and learn to move that buzz out. And that might mean getting up and walking on the spot. Yeah. Right. It might be something that isn't putting on your sleep app and trying to be calm. You actually might need to move some mobilized energy out because it never got mobilized in the day. Yeah. But I can't say to someone, when you feel buzzy in your legs, you should do this. Right. Because it might not be that. And that's where you have to learn the skill, which is obviously what I teach.
Yeah. So speaking of that, how can people find you? What's the best way?
My site is my name. So irenelyon.com. Depending on when a person hears this, listens to this, you can start with the 21-day nervous system tune-up that you're in the middle of doing. If you're getting this recording before March 8th of 2021. Our longer program, which is called Smart Body, Smart Mind, it only runs once a year. It starts on March 8th. We open up Reg on the 22nd of February. And that is like the granddaddy course. It's 12 weeks online. We work together at the same pace. Of course, people still take their time, but there are live lectures, there's Q&A, there's those neurosensory exercises, which is the practical work that I've melded that blends the somatic experiencing work, my Feldenkrais training, and also the work of Kathy Kane, which is more early developmental trauma work, and lots of education. Like we drown you in education.
Yeah.
Taught in a good way. You know, we have handouts and you fill in the blanks and all these sorts of things. And thus far, we've had people from over 65 countries go through these programs.
Wow.
So it's
amazing.
It's been going for a while. This will be the 10th time we've run it. And there's some pretty miraculous stories that come out of the program, from people's medications being not needed for thyroid, diabetes, to relationships, to falling in love, to chronic fatigue, to being able to sleep. I mean, it's just very broad. And it's because by working at that deep system, what the system needs will be what is helped. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll be sure to link all that also.
Link it all. And then there's, there's all the resources, YouTube, blog.
Yes.
I do quite a bit on social. I do a few like low fee classes if someone wants to just taste a little bit of the work. And when I'm traveling, I teach a movement workshop called Up and Down, but that's been on hold due to travel stuff last year.
Fingers crossed we'll be able to break out of that soon.
We'll see.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, like I said, I feel like we could talk another
I know
2 hours, but this has just been amazing. And I know so helpful. I know a lot of people are going to be coming and looking at your site and watching your videos and interested in the programs, because I really feel like this could just be the missing piece for so many people that are struggling right now. So I really appreciate you taking this time to talk with me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm glad to have met over the internet.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks, Sarah.